This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I'm Tony Pesta, joined by Corey Walsh, and I want to start this one off with a warning for any hot takes that might follow in the next 20 to 30 minutes because the Cleveland Cavaliers are back. That was a beautiful game of basketball, and so I would just like to start by apologizing to absolutely nobody for the takes that are about to be dropped on this pod because that was one of the most fun games we've had in a long time. Corey, how would you summarize this game?
I would summarize it as a coronation of the new face of the league is stepped on to the floor in Toronto. And no, it was not Ty Jerome, like I
As many
tweeted
would
out,
think.
but that is the first thought that would come to mind. No, Evan Mobley stole the show. And with it, I think stole the hearts of the Cleveland faithful in a game that really outside of the first quarter kind of got away from the Raptors and the Cavs just took it and never looked back. It was a really good first step for this team. And even though I don't know if Toronto is going to be a team we're talking about in the middle of the season as someone competing for a playoff spot, it's definitely always good to start the season off with things that you heard all off season getting put into action. And I think the Cavs couldn't, for that reason, have started off on a better foot, never mind the fact that they absolutely throttled the Raptors.
It's always good to beat the Raptors. It's always good to beat the Raptors and not have anyone get injured either. It was a very physical game to start off. I was, cringing every time someone hit the deck. But thankfully, as far as I know, we got out injury free. And yeah, I mean, aside from the first quarter being pretty competitive, they went on a huge run in that second quarter. And the game just got completely out of hand. The Cavs were up. They won the game by 30. I think it was late in the second half when they finally, breach that barrier, and they were just taking it straight to the Raptors. Like you said, we were seeing the proof of concept of everything that we've been hearing throughout the preseason and training camp. We spent all September wondering, are we going to see the MVP of September walk through that door and actually play in an NBA game? And Ty Jerome came out, and listen, he was playing with the starters. He was playing legitimate minutes there, and he looked good. I saw him hit a couple floaters. He banked one in. I'm trying to pull up his final stats here because he was balling in garbage time. 14 points, 6 assists, 2 steals for the MVP of September, carrying it over into October, a plus 16. Great game. But I do think, as you already mentioned, we have to be for real for a second. And we have to, let's take a moment to just honor that in back-to-back nights, the NBA has seen a father-son duo take the floor. Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes. It was one of the more unreal things I've ever seen. Mobley was just taking it straight to him. He clearly still takes it personal that Barnes won the Rookie of the Year over him, which was a little bit fraudulent. But there was a series of like 3 or 4 plays in a row. It got to the point where Barnes kept going ISO on Mobley, and Mobley kept shutting him down. And it got to the point where I stopped clipping every play because I was like, I have to be annoying at this point. Like I know I'm already insufferable on Twitter. I don't need to post the full 48 minutes of Mobley giving Scotty Barnes the business, but it was ridiculous. It was fantastic. Mobley had 17 points in the first 12 minutes. I was ready to call Tim Bontemps for an emergency pod. So be like, are you watching this right now? But what did you see from Evan Mobley in this game?
Tony, if you had to post the highlights of Evan Mobley on Scotty Barnes, YouTube would remove you because you'd be reported for copyright infringement. You'd be playing the full 48, like you said. It was a great game from Mobley. I think defensively, we saw what we've always seen, which is always comforting because it doesn't show that he's giving up something to give the offensive performance that he gave. He wasn't sacrificing his defensive motor or his active hands or being a relentless rim protector for anything. Offensively, it was just chef's kiss performance for Mobley because It was almost like Toronto didn't know what to do. You would see the Cavs come up the floor. If Mobley wasn't bringing the ball up himself, which originally, like off the tip, you were like, oh, I guess we're going through the growing pains of
It looked a
this.
little rough.
There was some loose dribbling going around. You're kind of like, but then Jackson, even on the stream, was like, these are the types of possessions you need for Mobley because you don't want him to shy away from these opportunities. But let me tell you, whatever trepidation Mobley had early on kind of went away pretty quickly. That dude, the Cavs would run up in transition, be four up. You kind of forget, be like, where's Mobley in this transition? Then as the play started, the action, the play, you see Mobley just trailing in over and over and over again, full head of steam. Euro stepped around Grady Dick, who was trying to take the charge. I mean, we were live on stream, but Jackson, I could have had heart palpitations. I was probably down for the count. It was a really good performance for Mobley. Like, you can't really undersell how good Mobley did. It's just one of those games that you're hoping this is just something where this is the blueprint. It's not going to be something where we talk about 2 weeks from now being like, we need Mobley to get back to that Toronto game for a mindset. But based on how the offense played, I really don't think that's where this offense is going. I think this is something that Atkinson implemented and it will stay.
Yeah, the start of the game had me nervous because really Mobley hasn't looked like this since that first preseason game against Chicago where we were like, finally, this is everything we've been waiting to see. And then he didn't play the second game. And the next few preseason games, he was just kind of out there. And then this one, like you said, it started off a little dicey. He was trying to dribble the ball between his legs, losing it. Guys are hitting the floor. He's not breaking ankles, but like if there's bodies on the floor, everyone's diving, trying to get the loose ball. So it was a little rough to start off, and I was getting nervous. Then he finally settled in, and we got to see him play really patient and in control with his dribble. He looked like he wanted the ball. He wanted to score. He wanted to be assertive. Jackson was mentioning this on the playback stream, which, by the way, just to plug that, Fear the Sword, we are doing on playback TV / Fear the Sword. We are doing watch parties for most of the games, not every single one. Of course, follow us on Twitter and you'll get to see when we're going to go live. But Jackson and Corey did tonight. They did a fantastic job. And one thing that Jackson was mentioning is that Mobley looked like he was really applying his strength and going all the way through a move, trying to finish. He didn't look like he was being hesitant. Didn't see a lot of pump fakes out of Mobley tonight, which he can do that to a disgusting degree sometimes, hit you with 4 or 5 pump fakes in quick succession in the paint. He didn't do that tonight. He was just, he wasn't hesitant. He wasn't unsure of himself. He just went straight up and it pays off. One thing that I really like is that even at we would see at times Mobley would get a rebound, and when it's an opportunity to run in transition, he would bring the ball up the floor maybe once a week. But tonight he would grab a rebound. Defense is back. They're already set up, and he's taking the ball up the floor anyways. He had a couple plays where he just grabbed the ball, went the full length of the floor, walked someone down, and scored in the paint. It was unreal. So tonight he finishes with 25 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. And the whole time he looked like the best defender in the world while he's doing it. Finished with 3 blocks and 2 steals. He impacted that end of the floor a whole lot more than it will show up in the box score. And it was just a stellar, stellar opening night for Mobley.
Yeah, I would say it was pretty demoralizing for Toronto. You saw early on they were trying to press, and it did work. It helped keep the Cavs kind of rattled early on, even when they were pressing Mobley. That's probably the smartest thing to do. I mean, the reps that he's had are so limited bringing up the ball that it doesn't matter. Like, if Ochai Agbaji is up in Evan Mobley's face, the height difference doesn't really matter. It's just Mobley alone isn't comfortable with those dribbling reps in game. So to have someone just up there early, but like we said, he shook that off pretty quickly and really just turned into a completely different player, I'd say, from the 7-minute mark onward. I mean, the first quarter for both teams was very ugly. Some of that being that it's regular, the beginning of the regular season. And then some of that's also just Toronto loves to make the game grind to a halt and just make it a rock fight the entire time. But unfortunately for Toronto, as we've said, the Cavs turned into turned up the gears, turned into a completely different team, I think, from the second quarter onward. And that was all led pretty much by the efforts of Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny has these guys looking completely different. Now, it's one game, like I said at the top 8. I'm not apologizing for any hot takes. You got me in the moment. I'm just rattling off takes. Kenny has this team looking brand new. we'll see what it looks like when they run into a wall and they have a rough stretch or something, if they revert some old bad habits. But tonight, like, Mobley looked like a completely different player. The way this Cavs team was playing as a unit was just way different from what we saw last season. I want to talk more on that as we get into other topics here, but as some people in the chat have already mentioned, actually, never mind. Before I get to LeVert, let's finish off the Mobley discussion first, because there's a couple more things I have to say. Let's not get too carried away. I am excited to talk about LeVert though, because he did play good. But Mobley finishes as a plus 31 in 27 minutes. Like I said, just completely dominant out there. Shoots 1 of 2 from the 3-point line, which maybe isn't the volume that you want to see. I think we want to see him get at least maybe 3 or 4 up there. I will say he looked very confident pulling it. Like, there was, again, no hesitation. The one that he made from the corner looked so effortless, so smooth. And one last thing that I want to note when we're talking about, that added muscle and applying his strength, he got to the free throw line 6 times. And that's something that, with how athletic he is and how great he is at finishing around the rim, if he can start to get to the free throw line too, that's just easy points that the Cavs have been leaving off the board as a team in recent years. And so I would like to see him continue to just apply pressure to the defense, get yourself to the line, get a bunch of easy scoring opportunities like he did tonight. Last note, he also led the Cavs in field goal attempts. Him and Donovan Mitchell tied at 14, but I don't have the stat off the top of my head, but I would assume that didn't happen very often last season or really throughout his career. Led the Cavs in field goal attempts really ever. A stat that is burned into the back of my brain. Last season, Mo Wagner attempted more shots than Evan Mobley. And this wasn't like an injury thing. Evan Mobley played more minutes, 100 more minutes than Wagner. And Wagner took more field goals. Now that's a weird comparison, but it's just like a mind-blowing thing. How does that even happen? So do you have any finishing thoughts? Is this something that you think is going to carry forward for Mobley, or are we getting carried away on opening night?
I don't think it's necessarily being carried away, because it'd be one thing to be like, oh, this offense looks different, and it's just a difference of they made their shots tonight versus they didn't. But it's just the diet of shots that Mobley had. I don't see how this is something that they would stray away from. I mean, how many times in his entire career have we seen the types of possessions that Evan Mobley had, regardless of him bringing up the ball, just him trailing and then making all these moves around the rim, getting around defenders, setting up other players. I believe he had one late in the third where he just no look backdoor cut George Niang.
I was going to bring this up. Yeah. It's like a no look dump drop off pass. I was like, what?
I was like, this is a completely different player. And it's not necessarily things that we didn't know he was capable of. It's just things that weren't being implemented in the past few seasons for Mobley. So it's just something where if this team is going to be at the level where we're talking about, they're going to be second in the East, first in the East, competing for like one spot in the finals. This is the Mobley that this team needs, where like the fact that Donovan Mitchell is not one of the things that we're talking about. It's like, oh, Donovan Mitchell had a good night, but Evan Mobley, that's how you know this team is kind of heading in the right direction. This team had an awful Darius Garland game pretty much, and it's not even a true concern in the grand scheme of this game, because now Mobley is elevating himself to this level of player.
Like I said, I don't have all the stats right now since we're doing this live, but I'm going to be really interested to see how many times throughout Mobley's career has he outscored Mitchell in a game. He had 25, Mitchell had 21. And really, this will be harder to find, but like, how many times have the Cavs not gotten a great game out of Mitchell or Garland? Like, Mitchell was really good tonight. He was just a little more, an afterthought. But like, how often do you get Mitchell and Garland being afterthoughts and the Cavs win, let alone they won by 30 points? I know the Raptors aren't great. We're not expecting them to be great this year, but I mean, this was just one hell of a showing. I do want to transition to talk about a couple other Cavs players who played good, and someone who two players who I've been a little rough on in recent history here. Listen, Caris LeVert and George Niang combined for 30 points on 12 of 14 shooting. I feel like I'm having a fever dream recording this episode, but they were great tonight. They both played really good. And one thing that I like is that I think with Kenny and his offense, when everyone is so involved, there's a lot less riding on LeVert or Niang to be positives or to create stuff on their own. Like, I think their worst moments have always come from like Niang's trying to make something happen. It's LeVert time. It's Caris LeVert time, right? Like, it didn't feel like that tonight. It felt like they didn't stand out as sore thumbs. And so when the ball is moving and every shot feels like it's within the flow of the offense, they absolutely drilled the Raptors tonight. They looked great doing it. Now they're not going to shoot 12 of 14 every single night, but I like their role under this Kenny offensive system. What about you?
I think I'm more impressed with Niang than I am with Levert. I think Levert, by his nature of play, is going to be a player night to night that our opinion is going to be like, that was a Karras night in a good way, or that was a Karras night in a bad way. I think what was more different with Levert was that he was more open to taking 3-point shooting. We didn't really fall into the situation of where Levert has like a decent look from three, but decides to sidestep and then enter into the mid-range and pull his deadly Levert mid-range jumper that we're just sitting there eye rolling into the back of our heads. But I'm glad he had a good game. I just hope the diet of his shots changes. The profile is like the biggest difference, I think, with Levert. I mean, Levert's going to be like who Levert is. It's just, there was a period of time last season where we kind of were thinking he was changing his approach to shooting. And this is the shot profile that we're more looking for. We know he can be a secondary creator, another ball handler for this team. But as we're probably going to discuss later, with Ty Jerome taking the step into the elite class, that might not be as necessary as we thought. But actually, I think I was more impressed with Niang, because Niang is someone that has gotten his fair share of lumps from Cavs fans as of late. And who are we if we don't give Niang his flowers when he has a good moment? I mean,
Gotta give him credit.
You gotta, because when he decides to join the pod someday and come on, for that collab, this is the episode we'll send to his PR person being like, see, we love George. We'd love to have him on.
Been a fan all along.
Yeah. Don't look at the other episodes. Those were just warm-ups. But Niang is someone where Jackson articulated this pretty well, and I agree, is that Niang is someone where he needs to be used in his spots of strength, like from corner three. The issue for Niang last season is just that he kind of felt like at times like the break glass in case of emergency, like JB's like, we need perimeter shooting. George, get in there and just let it rip. And George took that to heart and decided to take terrible shot selection out of need from the team for his shot selection. But this was a great game. He converted on good looks. I didn't feel like there was any times in which I was really that disappointed with a possession or decision from Niang. And if this is the Niang like that we're going to get more in the terms of he's like confined into his strengths and he doesn't have to play outside of his comfort zone, then I think this is a very digestible version of Niang that Cavs fans won't be on Twitter just angrily tweeting like, why is this guy on the floor? And maybe, Tony, you won't have to post so many clips this year.
We can only hope. I do agree.
That's probably a lot. I guess.
I do agree that this is like the ideal role for Niang. This is the way that I thought the Cavs would be using him when they signed him. And listen, tonight he was bang, bang, bang Niang. He went 3 for 4 from deep. And if he can do that every other night, I mean, that's all I really need from him. He didn't do anything else. He put basically zeros across the stat sheet. He did get a rebound, but it was still a great game from him. Because he did what he's out there to do, which is shoot 3-pointers. Caris LeVert, again, starts off 8 for 8 from the floor, absolutely balling. 0 turnovers. Like, you get a Caris LeVert game where he starts 8 for 8, 0 turnovers. The spirit of Michael Jordan was with him tonight. Hopefully we can continue that streak. One other thing that I want to mention, and we're going to talk about Darius Garland because, it's Ty Jerome season. He may have lapped him in the rotation. I'm just kidding there. We'll talk about Garland a little. I do want to point out that Kenny Atkinson talked about wanting to play more guys, go deeper into his rotation. And within the first 14 minutes, there was 8 minutes left in the second quarter, and 10 guys had already checked in for the Cavs. Now, some of that is because DG got into early foul trouble. Like Ty Jerome kind of had his opportunity because of that. But he was really digging deep into that rotation. And I really like that. I really like expanding the rotation. I like keeping the lineups fresh by constantly rotating guys out so you can get the most out of that group and kind of experiment and determine what is working, what isn't working. Hey, Caris LeVert, 6 for 6. Let's keep him in the game. There's going to be a night where, hey, Caris LeVert's 1 for 7 and he turned it over 3 times and he fouled someone for a 4-point play. Like, there's going to be some nights where it's not his night. And I hope that Kenny is a little quicker to adjust than the previous regime was. And the last thing that I want to say here, speaking of lineups, because this was something that was on the broadcast that just shocked me. I mean, it's not that shocking, but it's kind of shocking. Dean Wade started tonight with the core 4. last season, Wade and the core four did not play a single minute together last season. 0 minutes for Wade and the core four, despite being a pretty good fit on paper. And hey, the year before that, 22-23 season, that group, Wade and the core four, played 42 minutes together, very, very small sample size, but they outscored opponents by 20 points per 100 possessions. That was in the 100th percentile. And then they just never played together again.
That was cool. Let's never try
was like, that was awesome. We just beat the brakes off of that team with this lineup. Let's never do it again. Now, some of that last year, not to do like a whole retrospective on last year's Cavs, I'm sure if you like mapped out the injury report, like I know Darius was hurt, Donovan was hurt, Wade was hurt. Like there was probably, a little bit of mix and matching there that it just never quite lined up. And Strus was great. So I understand why you didn't take him out, but we have been talking about this recently. Jackson's been the number one guy pushing it, so I'll give him credit. Dean Wade in the starting lineup. It just makes a lot of sense. And I know that the data tonight didn't necessarily look crazy. I don't know what Dean Wade finished. His plus minus wasn't that great. But listen, the eye test matched. It looked good. And I think there's definitely a lot of meat potentially on the bone here. And so I'm glad that Kenny immediately decided to take a look at it. I'm a fan.
I agree. I didn't think it was a case of where that group needed to stay together. It became apparently clear in the second quarter onward that it was like, all right, well, we're kind of rolling with this deep lineup that we have, so we don't really need to revert back to the starting lineup. But that also was probably also due to Darius getting in foul trouble so early, so that wasn't necessarily going to be possible really. But overall, the starting lineup I thought was fine. I didn't really have any issues with it. I think Wade is a perfect player in the sense that he's never going to hijack anything. If anything, the thing that you constantly clamor for Wade is that he is more active shooting. And during the stream, Jackson and I both were saying how it wasn't necessarily like something that's going to be eye popping, but it's something more where you're not upset that he passed up shots, because that's what you would fear with Wade. And he has a really good understanding of how to operate within an offense. And he never makes the offense seem like he's bigger than the parts around him. And that's what makes him a good glue piece, and someone that, depending on how this stretch goes, it could be a situation in which they decide that this is their starting lineup and allow Strus to be more of that sixth man off the bench. But again, we're one game in. You can't really say these types of things because next game,
fly, let them loose. That's what we're
Strus,
here for.
Stay home. All right.
It's all about pushing the agenda. Strus, stay home. Garland, don't bother showing up. We got Ty Jerome now. We're going to talk about Garland in 1 second here, but I do want to say one more thing about Dean Wade, because I really I would just implore you to watch Dean Wade for entire defensive possessions, because this guy absolutely wreaks havoc in ways that you wouldn't expect. I've been watching it a lot since the preseason and in this game. He deters so many shots at the rim, something that you wouldn't really expect from a Dean Wade. But he is deterring and contesting shots and getting stops down there, not to the extent of Evan Mobley, but in a way that's helping this team a lot. And he's just so good on the perimeter. He's so lanky and sneakily athletic. He's just a superb defender. So Dean Wade, again, the stats didn't jump off the page. His plus minus didn't look too crazy tonight, but I'm a big fan of seeing him with the starting lineup, and I hope to see this experiment continue, because I think there's something there. We'll have to see. I won't get too carried away, but I think there could be something there. Now I want to transition to talk Darius Garland a little bit. I'm interested to hear if you have any takes, because I'll be honest with you, I don't have much of a take. It just wasn't a great game from him. Listen, he told some reporter, he said that it's an eye for an eye tonight. He got his eye poked the last time he was here. It's an eye for an eye. And he came out like freaking Gladiator, just fouling people left and right. 4 fouls in the first 10 minutes of the game. So it was just a weird game. I will say he shot poorly. It's kind of what you expect from a guard who's going to take a lot of threes. Not great at finishing at the rim. But I do think that the joy seems like it's back for him, as much as it could be in such a weird game. He was playing with a pep in his step. He was getting downhill and throwing lobs to Allen, some dump off passes. He had a really impressive, left-handed hook laser to the corner in the first or second quarter that was really good. And it's something that I've been watching for DG, because he's not the best at getting to the rim and kicking it out to shooters. He's more of a dump off passer. if you see stuff like that where he penetrates and kicks out and looks for the shooter, and I don't know who it was, but it was an assist. I'm pretty sure he made the shot.
I think it was Niang.
It might have been Niang. And so, like, that's just a great play from Darius Garland. And I do think that, again, I think this is just going to be a weird game where he got into early foul trouble. He started off 1 for 5, wasn't his night. It's okay. And that's the good thing about Evan Mobley stepping up, because it's okay if Darius doesn't have it going. Yeah, there's other options on this team. What did you think of Darius tonight?
Yeah, Darius, I think it's obviously a just throw it in to the wind kind of thing just because of circumstance, but it's also important to note that even though the results weren't what you were hoping for, the processing of everything he was doing made sense. It wasn't something where we kind of felt like he was not attempting stuff that we were hoping for. He was trying to get to the rim. There were a few times where he had to peel out just because the look wasn't there, and I'm glad he's not just trying to force a pass once he gets under the rim. Some guards just like panic and just try to 9-1-1 it in a different direction. He at least tried to reset on those types of passes, but the 3-pointers, there was good movement there. It wasn't necessarily the off-ball shooting I was hoping for. I still feel like a lot of his points generated were more self-created than in the flow of an off-ball movement, but you can't really, and like, it's hard to nitpick. Like, obviously I said this to Jackson during the stream. It's something where Garland is going to be a player that you can't really probably for the first month kind of gauge where he's at, because he's probably reacclimating to the same body that he was acclimating to last year when he put on all that weight. And then we kind of saw this weird period where we're kind of worried about Darius, but when you add the amount of weight that he adds, it's clear that he wants to change the way he attacks offense. And it's something where I'm not going to be here even like 2 weeks from now if Garland still is kind of iffy offensively. I'm not necessarily ready to say that he's going to be a liability for this team. It's something you just have to work through. I mean, a lot of injuries take time, and no player on this team racks up more injuries than Darius Garland.
Yeah, that's why, like I said at the top, I'm glad that we just got out of this with no injuries. And yeah, you kind of just take this game, toss it into the wind, hope that DG bounces back, because they are going to need him to bounce back. I know they won by 30 points, so it seems like ridiculous to, find things to be upset about. They're going to need DG to be a little bit better. Otherwise, we will have to have some difficult discussions, but I'm nowhere near ready for that, because I think you can just toss this to the wind. I like the process. I like the way that he was playing. I like the approach that he took. And considering that everyone across the roster seems to be bought into Kenny Atkinson and the way that he wants to play basketball, I hope that means that DG is going to stay bought into this. And once that shot comes around, once he's not, picking up 3 fouls in 6 minutes, we'll see a more regular game from him. Now, I want to talk just a little bit before we wrap out. I want to talk about some of the garbage time, because I will be honest, I was writing the Fear the Sword recap at that point because the Cavs were up by 30. I was like, let me get this done while I can. But it seemed like, Ty Jerome was going crazy. Porter and Tyson seemed like they had some nice moments. Did you have any takeaways from you and Jackson doing that playback live stream? Did you see anything in the last 8 minutes of the game? Because it was garbage time pretty early.
Well, we were going to Jerome. We were discussing were we just reserving him for select moments? Because we at the halftime, Tony joined us and we basically just talked about Ty Jerome for the entire halftime. And then we were like, oh, I wonder when they're going to throw him out again. Maybe they'll throw him out in the third. It took until garbage time for Ty Jerome to see the light of day again. It's almost like the Cavs have now found this secret weapon that they're just not willing to dispose to the lowly Raptors as they're just breaking them down. But in terms of other players that stood out, I mean, nothing really of note. Tyson is always going to be a player I feel like we're going to pay a little more attention to, because we don't know what meaningful minutes he's going to have. And I opened it when they saw he was checking in, being like, man, I hope they give him more off-ball action, because it didn't seem like they did. And they opened with him on ball right away. It was some ugly sequences, whether it's him losing the ball while trying to make a move, making a forced pass that gets into a turnover. But then he had some good looks. He had where he attacked, drew the foul at the rim, had some free throws, and then he had a heavily contested 3 that I was kind of surprised he took and made.
It was a moonshot.
I was kind of surprised on that one. I think he was inspired by Ty Jerome with his buzzer beater to be like, yeah, I'll take that too. But outside of that, I mean, nothing else. Looks like Tristan is not the Tristan of old, I would say. Yeah, it was some rough Tristan minutes, but I'm sure there's To the
2
league
points, 1
testing?
rebound. He was a -1. I think he was the only. Him and Craig Porter were the only minuses. It happened. It happens to the best of us.
Craig Porter Jr. didn't look awful.
No, he didn't. I clipped. I didn't end up posting this, but I did clip. They passed it to him wide open for 3, and he pump faked, and the defender still didn't come out, and then he just dribbled it back. I was like, okay. It was actually the play that led to the Ty Jerome fadeaway. The reason the shot clock was running out was because Craig Porter was like, I'm not going to shoot this one because it's not contested enough. Because that seems to be his mentality when it comes to 3-pointers. But he did look all right tonight. Jalen Tyson, we're going to be paying close attention to it, but it's hard to take anything away from the opening night game. I just lost the box score, by the way. I accidentally refreshed my page. So I was going to pull off some stats. Let me see if I can pull these up real quick because I had 2 more things on the agenda. 2 agendas to push, really. Okay. Stock down. Isaac Okoro kind of not really being a real rotational piece. It is what it is. Kenny's experimenting. He knows what he's going to get from Okoro. I'm trying to spin this the right way. Okoro did not really play.
If LeVert goes 8 for 8 for the rest of the season, we might not see Okoro again.
Yeah,
but
that's basically what happened there. And look, the defense looked great. Cavs all around looked great. So Okoro is kind of that guy who you need in there when the defense needs a little pick me up. They just looked great all around. Okoro didn't look bad. I'm noticing the rotations that he was not really, it was
it took till the 8th or 9th
got in there earlier
for him to get in.
Yeah, he was like the 8th or 9th man to get in there. So I'll be keeping an eye on that as someone who has a lot of stock on Okoro Island. This could be a disastrous quarter for me.
You bought the penny stock of Ty Jerome.
It's true.
Look, so it's paying dividends.
They're canceling each other out. Last thing that I have to say, just for some slander, Scotty Barnes. It's not even slander. 3 for 14 tonight, 9 points. Can't all be Evan Mobley, So
I kind of forgot I had Scotty Barnes on my fantasy team until I looked after. I'm like, why is my shooting percentage so?
That is tough to hear.
Hey, this is the price to pay for my fantasy team stinking, is that the Cavs can just blow the brakes off everyone else. That's fine with me. I'll go 0 whatever in this league.
No, I'm excited to check the fantasy league because I honestly don't even remember who else on my team. So it's going to be like a jump scare.
Well, if you had Chris Boucher, then you had a great day.
18 points. 5
that was my only good call out because I was like, Boucher's usually good for 2 random threes a game, and I got that in the first quarter.
Gave you 4 of them. Yeah, he doubled it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all around just a fantastic. It's hard to argue with winning by 30 points. It's hard to be upset about anything. Cavs all around just look incredible. And that's all for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. If you enjoy the show and you want to support us, then go ahead, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We really appreciate everyone who tuned into the live stream, and we appreciate everyone who watches us. I'm glad we got the season started off with a bang. This was really the best way to get the ball rolling. And with all that being said, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs.